have any questions? Mr. Russell, you'd like to speak on your behalf? Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion. Nobody has any questions or comments?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Yes, Luke. We have a motion and a second to approve the rezoning of this property. All those acknowledged by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. Item number 5. We have a request for a special use permit to allow construction of a distribution substation in an M1 for a property located at south of the 3500 block rather of East 6th Street and East Tyler Road, across from the Tyson Tyler Road plant and north of Alumax plant, submitted by Katria Gibbon on behalf of Energy Arkansas. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yes, sir. So as you can see from your report, this is the 3500 block of East 6th Street. It's on the southeast corner of East 6th Street and Tyler Road. Immediately across on the west side of 6th Street, or excuse me, Tyler Road, you have the Tyson Foods distribution and manufacturing, but you also have JW Aluminum, Rockline Industries, and everything else associated with the M1 zoning. There is R2, established older single-family detached residential development on the north side of this street on East 6th Street. But aside from that land use, the surrounding land uses are predominantly industrial. If you look in your report, you can see that there's a graphic. It's roughly 9.22 acres. You can see that the parcel technically does recess itself a little bit beyond with Tyler Street, but it has frontage on both Tyler and East 6th Street. Also in your report, you'll see that there is a site plan or computer-aided design, what they call a model layout. It shows you how the distribution lines will access those existing power lines, as well as an ingress and egress road that extends from East 6th Street and works its way south through the pad itself where they're going to develop the substation, and then it bends off and off to the west and accesses Tyler Road. There will be a chain link fence surrounding the substation, obviously for security reasons, and the applicant can obviously qualify some of those more detailed than the staff can. But at this point, there are just several recommendations in the staff report. Essentially, our biggest comment was that they provide some level of
Yeah, we
screening.
can't hear you.
Yeah, pull the microphone a little closer to you.
I'm so sorry, is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
That's better, thank you.
The report essentially recommends conditional approval. The condition there being some level of screening or buffer between the substation and those residences that situate themselves on the north side of East 6th Street. The applicant had submitted to staff some examples of how Entergy had provided security and levels of screening, if you will, with prior substations and examples. If the applicant would like to show you folks what they submitted to staff, I'm not sure if that necessarily qualifies as landscaping, but that is up for discussion by this board. It's not really for staff to recommend whether that's sufficient for this board or not, but it doesn't necessarily provide full screening the way maybe some other substations would. But again, this is my first time with the city of Russellville, so in all fairness, I think that's up for the discussion. Aside from that, we do recommend approval.
I would like to see something on how they were looking at doing the screening on that, if they've got some.
Unfortunately, I don't have any visual aids. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. Some of the examples that they did show had sort of some fencing. It was not exactly opaque, but if the applicant would like to come on up and maybe explain a little bit more to you folks, I think that would be suitable at this time.
Thank you.
easy to me. It's just chain link fence. And they put shrubbery or something around it. I know that is, they're talking about these people, you know, in their neighborhoods across the street and stuff, so, you know? I mean, that may not be conducive to what they normally do.
Okay, do we have any questions or any comments about the handout that we were just given? And,
Is this consistent with the other around the city that's been done in the past? As far as the,
You're talking to her.
you got anything, Tony? You want to step up to the mic up here, Tony? State your
Thank you, Tony Moore, and I'm proud to be here to represent some friends of mine, John Carruthers and Linda Greer back here, and they are homeowners in this little area here, and I actually have it listed for them, and so we're trying to sell a little house there. And so they called me and asked if I would come by tonight and see if we could find out a little bit about the impact that this might be on them being able to sell their home. And of course, I think all of us would assume that the noise issue and lights and other things. There's a third little issue I'd like to address, and that would be drainage. This is an area that is extremely wet, and the old Terrell Bishop edition has been noted for many years of having some a lot of drainage issues. And so they certainly have been dealing with that as long as some of their other neighbors. But my first request would be, think about, this would be so much better if we could just move it a little further south and get it away from any of the impact of these homes. There's industrial, the Tyler Road Tyson plant is directly west of the property, and then we have Aluminax that's further south. Anywhere further south that they could move this would take it away from virtually any impact to these residential properties that are only located there on 6th. So I would submit that's an idea that you might consider. Is it just going down, I'm saying, listen folks, just a few hundred yards further would make a big impact on this noise issue that's at constant hum. Now I'm assuming the constant hum is going to be true. I don't know that's true, but I assume it is. And I'm assuming they're going to have the lights and all those other things that typically goes with a transfer station like this. So if it goes down further to the south, it takes away all the impact of these neighborhoods right here. So that's one thing to consider. The second thing is, I appreciate Mr. Duffield's question about the barrier. That barrier, it should be greatly enhanced to the neighborhood side at least. I think that's a minimum request there. And then the lighting, there should be something about the lighting that's going to be going on 24 hours. Just think about you living across from that. And thirdly is drainage. And the drainage issue, the whole area just needs a lot of rework for drainage. And the elevation of this pad is going to exacerbate that drainage. And I think you simply should look at making sure that they have a strong drainage plan. We need storm drains in that area. This would be maybe an opportunity to fix on some of those items. And that's the comments I have. And Linda, did I do good? Did I get a thumbs up? Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Mr. Moore, before you step down, what's the address? What's their address?
The address of John and Linda's is 3509 East 6th, and it's only 88.5, and so we take all offers this evening. Any other questions? Thank you.
Tony, before you step down, is this okay, Chairman? If I,
Right ahead.
I'm sure they're going to address some of this, but the light trespass issue, I can understand that. Do you have any? I mean, this is not your first rodeo. Do you have any solutions? Is there a possibility to where those? I know you're not a lighting engineer, but where those could be directed to help eliminate some of the trespass?
You know, Nathan, I think I think the impact of all these things when you have industrial or commercial collide with residential, as you have to deal with so common, is how do we find a happy medium where we can all get along, right? And that's a challenge, and I thank you for your service. That's not easy. And so this transitional issue here is exasperated by this is going to be here a long, long time, and it's going to, the noise, I think the stair step is noise first. That persistent hum, and there's a little stigma that still goes back to the leukemia age of the 70s. I know all of you have heard of those. You remember the leukemia scare that came out of a Swedish study back in the 70s about that transmission lines were going to create all kinds of leukemia. That has not turned out to be an accurate study, I want you to know. But I deal with inaccuracy in buyers all the time. So perception is reality when you're dealing with buyers of real property. And so just because that may not be the accurate truth of the science doesn't mean it's not in their mind that's an impact. So I think the noise has an impact, Nathan. I think there should be some consideration. I don't know if Entergy's prepared to compensate. They have eminent domain rights. I mean, so they could do some things. You could see what they're going to do with that. That's an idea at how they, particularly if it stays where it is. I think it's fair to say that maybe they should have some compensation for those issues. And there's appraisers out there that would do that.
I'm good, thanks.
Yes, sir. Anything else?
Is there a representative from Energy here that can answer some questions? Could you?
Thank you, Tony.
So the first off, as far as the drainage.
State your name for the record.
Oh, it's Clay King with Entergy. We'll be the project manager for the project. And in the documents we provided y'all today, it shows the proposed drainage on the site. We had our civil engineer prepare that, and it shows that it does drain away from 6th Street onto, or 6th Street south off of the substation site. So, or I can, if I could. So we went ahead and had that and prepare the sheet flow for the substation. And as you can see, the arrows on the site plan directing the water to the south, and we also have a swell that'll direct the watershed south of the site. The elevation at East 6th Street is at 414, and we will fall to approximately, I think it falls 411, 412. We'll build up the front of the pad at 411 and 412, so we'll have steady fall from 6th Street, and that extends further south on the site.
Okay, let's bounce back to the light trespass. Are there some directional things y'all could do for that so these people wouldn't be lit up all night, every night?
Well, the lights will be directional towards our equipment, and so the rear of the substation is actually what will be facing 6th Street. Now, I'd have to get with our engineers to find out exactly, and they could probably run some models to see which direction the light will travel. But I don't know if that's something I can answer at this point. I mean, it will be directed at our equipment. It won't be facing out of the substation, or everything will be facing in, but of course, some of the lights at the front of the substation will be facing back towards 6th Street, but they will be facing up.
Were there any other sites that were considered that weren't close to residential? And if so, why was this one chosen?
There were. So our first site was where the Bitcoin operation went in, or directly adjacent to it at the corner of East 6th Street and Tyler. Obviously, they bought and moved their equipment in there. I don't have any maps, but so the transmission line, we typically build substations along transmission lines because that's just what we do. It's expensive to build transmission lines. We try to keep costs down. So the transmission line is already in place at East 6th Street. It extends to the east and then south along the far border of the neighboring property. And we went all along that transmission line. And the property between basically here and I-40 is not suitable. There was one area that could potentially work, but the site work was going to be quite expensive. And I think the city of Russellville, us, and a few others have already certified that site for industrial, if that's correct. You know which property I'm talking about, Mike? I think it butts up to JW Aluminum. So that was, you're right, that was one potential property we looked at, but it's not very level. It'd be extensive site work and it'd be quite costly, so.
That spot you're saying is at the, pardon me, the corner of Tyler Road there and the corner where that property, the property that you're talking about meets up with what's owned by JW Aluminum? Is that what you were talking about?
The rear of our property,
Yeah.
or our proposed property, abuts JW Aluminum.
And that would not be suitable there in that corner on Tyler, why?
Oh, on Tyler, that property has already been purchased by another company.
Do you know, on that end of town, how long has it been since there's been any upgrades to the electrical out there, do you know? I mean, will this service that part of town, or is this gonna be something that's gonna service 40 miles from here, or what's that gonna take care of?
Now, this is going in place due to Russellville East, existing substations over there. It's been there for a long time.
You're talking about the one across from like Chick-fil-A?
That's correct, right? And with all the industrial in the area, all the residential load, that substation it's met its capacity. So, Mike could probably speak more about that. He's more experienced with the Russellville area. But my understanding is that this was to prevent overload from that substation and also provide a redundancy backup. Because at this time, I don't think that they have quite the ability to provide switching between different circuits. If, say, something at Russellville East were to fail, then they would it will provide more redundancy from this substation. So it'd be quite the upgrade.
Right. Yeah, if you don't mind.
As he was saying, the Russellville East substation's at capacity. So that pretty much ties your hands is what you can do, you know, if you have a failure or something to shift the loads. We have a couple of industries that will be expanding that we know of that's going to add about 5 megawatts of load, which the East substation cannot take that much. If we have any more industry in the industrial park, that will add to it. We also have a current industry of moly, which we can't put on the East substation because of its load conditions, which forces it to be fed from the tail end of a circuit out of the South substation. And that fact alone causes moly quite a bit of issues. They'd be a third of the exposure distance coming from the East substation or this new proposed substation versus coming from the South substation. And what that means is, excuse me, their exposure to something happening to the line that causes it to blink or to go out is tripled their exposure over what it probably should be if it was moved back over where it needs to be. And any future growth, we just don't have the capacity in that area right now to serve it without doing something different. It's all the industries on the industrial substation and all those on the east side of town will be better served and have more flexibility with additional substation.
Thank you.
I have a comment on that. I think the transmission lines have been there for a long time. It's fronting on Sixth Street. I'm not sure what you know what the hum or the decibels are off of those power lines now. I don't know if moving the substation to the south, even 100 yards, is going to make that much difference in it. I would think maybe as far as energy, I understand you can do a lot with the lighting to kind of offset that. I think you can handle that pretty easily. I don't know about about some type of if you're asking for more of a barrier, some type of something more than just a fence. If it's more about the aesthetics, or it's more about noise, or light pollution, is as far as what the homeowner's issue is with it.
Can I address that?
Sure.
Commissioner Duffield?
Sure.
I think the answer is yes. I mean, so I think, we heard them say that they had an alternate site, but it was too expensive. And so I have a problem, number one, saying, hey, it's not really their problem that's more expensive site. If there's an alternate site, I understand growth requires power and we need power. I'm not opposed to the power, but I would tell you tonight, if you grant it, that you should grant it at least with contingency clause, that you would be able to further look at some of the conditions of what they're going to do about noise, light pollution, and other things, and drainage. So at least you have an opportunity to maintain some control, because I'm not hearing any of those answers this evening. And I would submit that would not give a blanket approval until you have a chance to at least look at some other details on this site. I think the better site was the other one you referred, but if they don't want to do that, you don't want to require that, at least make them come back with some specifics to minimize the impact on these homeowners.
So, from the homeowner standpoint, if Energy can do all that they can to try to minimize light, aesthetics, all the other things, is that satisfactory? Okay.
Is there any other questions? I'm gonna chime in here and say that I would feel like that it would be good if we were to I'm just gonna recommend we don't take action on this tonight, that we possibly table this until some some of what Luke was talking about can be looked at. Some of these options can be
Well,
we can see what those options are.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to hold up the project, because I think this is actually, this is good for the city, that we're in a situation where we're needing to upgrade the substation. So I don't want to, they've obviously put in a lot of engineering and site work and in this process already. So it would be my recommendation that, after hearing from the homeowners, that if in good faith, Energy is going to do the best that they can to try and minimize those impacts with the neighborhood on the north side of Sixth Street there, and do all that they can. But I would not be in favor of tabling or causing Energy to any delay in getting started with the actual part of this project, with acting in good faith to do all that they can as far as that.
That makes sense. If we could get those contingencies into the
Look,
motion.
yeah, Luke, could we just add that to some contingency, some language in there? Would that work with you?
If I may, as your staff planner, I did want to interject something, and Laquita, if you wouldn't mind qualifying this, I do believe even if they were granted a special use permit tonight, they'd still have to go through the large-scale development process. And a lot of the engineering level details that we're talking about tonight are also dealt with regardless of what the zone is. Even if it were or weren't granted, it still has to go through a very detailed level of large-scale review, which we would do for you, along with other city representation. So if that helps you with your decision and your motions, I just would offer that up to you.
I have one other question for the gentleman from Energy. Right behind the substation there in front of ConAgra, there's like a pretty good lot there. Is there any possible way to put it adjacent to that substation? Yeah.
So I've actually have another project that'll go in service in 2020 where we'll be expanding that substation, adding actually a transmission piece of equipment on that piece of property. So
This one couldn't go there.
that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, we'll be adding a transmission piece of equipment to the south of that station. So.
Luke, was that a motion? Would you like to make it into one?
I'll make a motion that the energy project be approved with contingencies that Energy will present to minimize the impact of all the homeowners on Sixth Street.
What does that include? I mean, what are they able to do to minimize it? Do you think? I don't-
Sound, light, and aesthetics. Drainage also.
They're required to address a variety of different things under Section 7 of the Land Development Code, not the least of which deals with street classes, exterior lighting, direction
What
pattern.
about the aesthetics?
Aesthetics. Well, part of the submittal process for large scale does mention landscaping. Now, does that to say that every large scale development that comes into the city of Russellville is going to have landscaping for approval? Not necessarily, but it is mentioned in the regulations because it allows you all to make that determination whether landscaping is necessary.
Does Energy have that in their plan?
We don't typically install vegetation on substation
That's what I was thinking.
transmission lines, but we have our group that's dedicated to getting rid of vegetation. So it's not in our best interest to add vegetation on these sites.
Another way to look at it too is not necessarily vegetation. Buffering, if you will, against noise, buffering, if you will, against light can be achieved in a variety of different ways. It doesn't have to be vegetation, and even if it is vegetation, it can supplement a larger plan. Maybe it includes some vegetation that doesn't grow very high at all and doesn't infringe upon the height of the lines.
I believe that's what Commissioner Duffield was referring to. Okay. So, do we, you want, does that answer your question about what the contingencies consisted of, I guess? Okay, yeah.
So what's the
Yeah,
motion?
you'd asked about his contingencies, what those consisted of. I guess that would answer that question. But
So that's your motion, that's what you're making?
Yes, I'll go with that.
okay, we have a motion to approve the special use permit for the, with contingencies. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. Next item. We have a request for a 6-month waiting period requirement, to waiver a 6-month waiting period for the special use permit for the adaptive reuse of the existing Kmart building for storage, U-Haul truck, and trailer share and related retail sales submitted by Americo Real Estate Company. Do we have a staff report on that, Kevin?
There's no formalized staff report. This was, I believe, looked at by my predecessor. And I don't believe that there are much in the way of any changes from that initial report. I know that there was some discussion about there being outside storage relative to the inside of the adaptive reuse for the Kmart. I believe at this point, though, we're dealing with something procedural.
So nothing's changed from a couple of months ago. Anybody have any questions regarding this request? Do I hear a motion?
Is there a representative here from the company?
There is? Would you, do you have any comments you'd like to make at all on?
No, I think that, unfortunately, the commissioners approved it, 4-3 on our last visit. We was going back to our architect to make just a few adjustments before it went to staff. Without our recommendation, it went to the staff, and was presented what y'all had approved, or had put contingencies on. That wasn't the plan we agreed to that evening we were here. And now we're just working to come back before y'all with the correct plan. And we're gonna get approval again, so then we can get it to staff properly.
There's a lot of miscommunication last time,
Okay.
so we're trying to rectify that.
The miscommunication wasn't with this board.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're in a spot where we have to approve the recommendations or for the request, so we'll just go through we'll go through it again and maybe this time it won't be so, maybe this time it'll be a little smoother. So,
I'm understanding correctly, what we're here this evening for is just to get the waiver approved.
that's what I mean.
We can come back.
Right,
to this board, is that
right.
Okay.
Yes, that's all we're doing tonight.
Okay.
We'll make sure.
Yeah,
Ju-
that's all we're doing. We're gonna pass it on. Yeah, that way you guys can reapply. Okay.
Yes.
All right, any questions, commissioners? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second.
Shirley, did you do that? Okay.
To approve the request for the waiver of the 6-month waiting period. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, we do have a late agenda item here. The request for the approval of a large-scale development for the proposed expansion of 56,000 square feet to the existing Tabor Metals plant, submitted by Tabor Metals, Kirby Specialties, and Barrett and Associates. Does
Okay.
anybody from Barrett and Associates like to step up? Or do we have a staff report on that first, I guess? So-
Just very briefly, the staff
Okay.
report you have in front of you indicates the property. It's roughly 915 South Elmira Avenue. It's the existing Tabor extractions plant. Essentially, they want to add 56,000 square foot addition. It would be essentially connected to the existing facility. The staff really just makes a mention that there's surrounding manufacturing zoning. There is access, obviously, to the railroad tracks. The property is not within a floodplain, so the staff did look at that. There are a few detailed comments in an email that I actually have in the report. That was helped spurred by folks from the city that I thought had some very good comments. But that's really just to help spur some discussion tonight. But from a large-scale development standpoint, the only thing that staff would ask for is that we have the two outstanding items adhered to for drainage as well as fire suppression. And I won't read directly from the report, but if you all have any questions about that, we can certainly help address them.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. Mr. Garza?
Get out of your way.
David Garza with Barrett and Associates. We are working with Tabor on this project, as well as Hegel Architects, working with the development. The good thing about this is that the project site is in the back, so it's not impacting anything towards the front. And the two things that were outstanding that we were working on are the drainage and then the fire suppression, or how they're going to handle the fire suppression for this new project. The drainage is pretty simple. I think we've outlined that with the staff and with the city engineer. There's an existing detention pond just over to the east of this that has not utilized, or is not being utilized to capacity. It actually, if you go out there, it just kind of slants down. If you look at the photograph, you can see where the water's holding. There's just a little bit of water in that southeast corner. And then the material just slopes up. So they're catching everything that they need today, but it can be enlarged for this building. And we also have a piece of triangular track just east of that if necessary, we can enlarge that area for the drainage for this. And I think the staff saw that and said that would be perfect. So I don't think they have any problems with that once we get the actual calculations done. And we're in the works right now. This has kind of been a fast-track project because they're needing to get the equipment in there and the building built by October. That's when the equipment's going to arrive. So there doesn't seem to be, from the discussions that we've had with the staff, that much concern as far as the drainage area, because it looks like there's plenty of area to enlarge that pond. The second thing, we met today, the architects met with Richard and with Brian at the fire marshal's office, and they discussed the fire suppression. And I think we've come to a somewhat of a discussion. I guess you can allude to that, Richard, or Brian can. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Brian Holstein. We did have a pre-construction meeting with an architect, Bob Hegel, and at this point, there is some things that has to be worked out, but that's all the building process, and whatever happens basically is going to be per code. So we're satisfied that whatever we approve will meet the intent of the building code.
So what we're going to ask, or what the planner is going to ask, is two contingencies. The contingency that the building permit will not be granted until the staff has approved the drainage calculations and the drainage plan, as well as the fire suppression plan. And our clients, they're fine with that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions regarding this?
I'll make a motion to approve with contingencies.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
Got 'em.
Okay. All right. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. All right. And the last item here is we have to elect officers for the year. Chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. Okay. Do I hear a, how do you want to? Yes, ma'am.
Trey,
On just that last one, I'm just curious, because on large-scale development, there's a 20-day requirement of turning it in. And I noticed on the initial packet, it wasn't there, and then it was developed, it was put as a late agenda. And I was inquiring to Brian as to when this 20-day requirement under our Land Subdivision Development Code. So that was my only inquiry, and I don't know, I don't get the packets, so, but it is in our code.
20 days.
Yeah, he's already gone. Okay. I'll give him a call. I'll call Dave tomorrow. All right. What was you?
can we go ahead and request the waiver now?
I can see where we could waive a code requirement.
Said application shall be filed at least 20 days prior to a regular meeting of the planning commission. I mean, that's the whole reason why we have a code, is to go by it. And there's not a waiver one built expressly in there, so I don't think you could inherently do one.
Okay. Well,
Now, if it was,
We have a special call meeting from the date of the.
you could.
Because it's time sensitive, right?
Yeah. We'll just have to call a special meeting to address this, I guess. That's the only way I can see to.
Or if you can show that it was turned in 20 days before, if the application was stamped in some way when it was received.
I think what we probably need to do is, go ahead and, let me, do a special call meeting,
Okay.
and that way we know the requirements.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, Trey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trey.
Appreciate you pointing that out. Okay.
When you drop back and rescind this,
So what we'll do is table this and I'll set a special call meeting.
Okay,
to
let's,
address the large scale development.
okay. Table it for the, okay.
And
Let's-
it'll be the day that I receive the paperwork.
Who made that
So I'll
motion?
see what day I received it.
Luke, did Luke make that?
Luke made it
Luke,
out.
if you wanna,
Luke and Shirley.
you wanna amend your motion, you wanna amend the motion to table this until the special call meeting? Would that be,
I'll amend that.
okay, all right.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table the large-scale development request by Tabor Metals till such time we schedule a special meeting for this. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. All right, sorry about that, folks. All right. Yes. Well, we were just made aware of an error on, that we've tabled it until we could reschedule the meeting, so.
to be within those guidelines of the 20-day period.
Let's see.
I don't like the agenda.
I don't need
Okay, let's go on to item number 8. Do I,
Here, no, on that one, that wasn't Shirley. 20 days. You seconded that.
Yes, I did.
can we make one motion to do all the officers the same way, if so moved? Okay.
Has that been turned in?
That's what-
Has this large scale, has it been turned in? It was just not on the agenda? Is that correct?
Has it been turned in?
It was,
How long have you had it? When was it turned in?
Let's see. The letter was actually written on the, hold on just a minute. It was written on the February the 4th, but they were waiting on some other paperwork. So
the application wasn't complete.
they just didn't have all the information.
So when did you actually receive the application?
Let's see. I think it was like a week after.
So on the 11th, somewhere around the 11th,
The 12th.
12th? Okay,
I
12th.
think it was the 12th.
Okay, we're looking at 20 days from the 12th.
That'd be
Is that
March
correct?
2,
It was about a week off, I think.
about March 2.
Yeah, March 2nd. Okay.
So next week, sometime next week.
Yeah,
So
Right, okay.
hopefully we can get that done.
okay,
Okay.
all right. Okay, we can, as far as item number 8 here, if everybody is if anybody has any nominations for any other positions, we can nominate and vote on each position, or we can, well, we can entertain a motion in a second to leave the officers where they are. That's strictly up to you guys.
Make a motion, leave it the way it is.
Second.
Come on, guys.
Discussion.
Nobody wants to be the chairman. Okay, all right. We have a motion and a second to elect the 2019 officers as where they were sentenced as they were stated in 2018. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nathan? No?
Nope.
Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay. All right, we are adjourned.
Nathan wants to be the chairman.
No.